Hello, Yizhao Martin is licensed marriage and family therapist, couples therapist. So 2 weeks ago, I brought up the topic of that with ADHD brain means a higher chance of transgression or infidelity. So I did some research, a brief research. Just to warn you, today's video is a little bit technical and brainy. So I discovered there are 3 studies done related to ADHD and someone's sexual behaviors. So the first 2 ones were done on adults with a childhood ADHD diagnosis, which means they did a study done like a self-report of sexual behaviors when they were adults already, but they had a childhood diagnosis of ADHD when they were back in as a child or children. So those 2 studies, one of them is called the Milwaukee Longitudinal Study of ADHD Children, and the other one is called the Pittsburgh ADHD Longitudinal Studies. So I put the link down, so if you're interested, you can go in and read about those studies. So basically, the findings are very similar. They did a study on the controlled group, which is similar to the childhood diagnosis ADHD group. Their age, their ethnicity and race and class and child education are similar or relevant, equivalent to the one in the ADHD diagnosis group, so they can compare the two. And the outcomes are the one with the ADHD childhood diagnosis tend to have earlier onset of sexual relationships and intercourse. They have more lifetime sexual partners. They have more casual sex. And they are less likely to employ contraception, which leads to higher risk of teen pregnancy. But those are done on, they use the outcome mostly from white male adults between the age of 19 and 25. So there's a new, more recent study done that's in 2012 called ADHD Symptoms and the Risky Sexual Behaviors in Young Adult Women. That is done in the southern part of Southwest Texas, and they took a sample of low-income women from different racial ethnicity background, and they didn't have a diagnosis of ADHD, but they asked them to do an ASRS, ADHD self-report symptoms. So they basically report what they think they have ADHD symptoms, and the study finds that the more symptoms someone has for ADHD, there are more certain behaviors. But they divide it into 2 groups, the inattentive ADHD subtype and impulsive hyperactive subtype. So what did they find out is someone with the more inattentive ADHD symptoms tend to have a higher chance of using alcohol before they get involved in a sexual relationship or intercourse. And with someone with more impulsive, hyperactive ADHD symptoms leads to a higher chance of them having sex with risky sexual partners, and they have more sexual partner in the previous years of the study. So those are the only studies I found that even speak on this topic about ADHD, symptoms diagnosis, and sexual behaviors. So what I draw from those studies with the limited data and the sample of the population is, if you have more ADHD symptoms, there's a chance you're more vulnerable to having poor judgment or compromised judgment when it comes to choosing sexual partners. And one may be more likely to get involved sexually with someone before they have a good judgment or a sense of who that partner or person is. So there is more impulsivity in getting involved in having sex. So does it mean that leads to infidelity and transgression? No, I don't think so. There are way more factors need to be considered, and it's very complicated when it comes to infidelity and transgression. So I want to take a look with you on the ADHD brain and how that may play a part in this risky sexual behaviors or poor judgment. So the prefrontal cortex, the front part of our brain, is very involved in executive functioning, which means managing impulses, planning, making sound judgment. In our topic, meaning like, is this a good idea for me to have sex or involved with this person right in front of me, even though that looks really good? So the prefrontal cortex is sensitive to its neurochemical environment. What does it mean? It means it needs these optimal levels of norepinephrine and dopamine that are needed for proper prefrontal cortex control of behaviors and attention. So there's a theory. There's no way for us to find out that we don't have enough technology to monitor someone's brain with ADHD while they're making those judgments and see exactly what happened. They may see certain area that's light up, not as light up. That's all they got. And from there, they draw a couple of theories, right? So one of the theory is called the low arousal theory. They talk about the ADHD brain with less tonic dopamine lying around. So the person with ADHD may be more sensitive to their environment to seek out stimulation. What does it even mean, right? So dopamine is one type of neurotransmitters. We have many. It's one type of neurotransmitters, and it's also a form of hormone that got released in a certain part of our body and then transferred to our brain for all kind of activities. So it is what we believe the reward center. How do I put it in a simple way? I think we have many neurons in our brain, right? And each neuron has a piece of information to be delivered to the next one. And when they deliver successfully, we form a new neural pathway. So when we are learning as a child, if I tell you this is a table, I keep telling you this is a table, next time you see it, you believe it's a table, that neural pathway got formed and got reinforced. Right? So this neurotransmitter, this neuron is releasing a dopamine. Let's say one person is planning a date night for them and their partner, and planning this activity of making phone calls, and they're more complicated. There are more neurons involved. I'm making it very simplistic just to show you how it works. Let's say this neuron is in charge of planning for the date night. This neuron is the memory of last time you had a date night together and how happy you are together. So if this neuron you're planning is releasing a dopamine, I say this is a dopamine, and this neuron has a receptor that catches it, and that many done, those two get connected, and dopamine get passed on from one neuron to the other. What happens is when you're planning a date night and you think about how great a time you had last time, the memory reinforces you, making you more pleasurable and motivated to plan date nights with your love. That's in a typical brain. Well, they say in an ADHD brain, there's not enough dopamine lying around. So they may be planning this activity and then hit a hurdle. It's not that easy. They have to make a couple phone calls and not available. Say this restaurant, they got frustrated. There's not enough connection and the neural pathway and the dopamine lying around tell them this is a pleasurable, even though right now it's miserable. It's going to be pleasurable. I promise you. They don't have those dopamine lying around. So they may just give up because the neural pathway is not formed. Planning date night with my loved one for my loved one leads to happy moments for us together. It has been proven. They don't have that connection, and they're easily frustrated in the process when they hit a hurdle in planning a date night. Let's say this person is planning a date night, the one with the ADHD brain, in a coffee shop while they're hitting a hurdle. This neuron is not happy, not having enough dopamine to bind with. And then someone is attractive going along their way. They got distracted. They're either looking into their eyes or they are having interaction and they forgot about what they're doing, or actually they prefer not to go back to what's repetitive and boring for them to plan this date night. Ugh, that is a compromise situation that are totally made up. But I'm making a point to say, if this is what's happening, ADHD brain might be more attracted to the environment with the stimulation than staying in on task, planning this date night that is not really pleasurable for them because there's not enough dopamine that's being passed around to make that linkage. I'm not saying this is happening, but this is a scenario that makes them vulnerable. And I believe everybody's brain seek pleasure naturally, and I want to explore that from internal family system perspective with parts work, using myself as a tool. So I will be meditating on all the situation scenarios that I gathered from books and training materials and cases on infidelity and transgression to showcase you what different types of transgression, what parts might get involved and their parts interaction, and how particularly possibly you heal yourself and stop those linkage that's not healthy for your relationship and refocus on your love bond. So today I introduced you this concept called the dopamine chaser. So when I meditated on the dopamine chaser, I imagined someone that's from my environment I feel attracted to, that's not my love, and then how I feel towards them and what happens internally. And I meditated on that process while I'm having neurofeedback done on myself. I noticed this part of my brain, just right here in the upper front left of my forehead, is having sensations and it lights up spark lights like that. And then when I try to do some part work and meditate on it, I don't see any words and personality like other parts. It's a pure just lighting up part for me, and it's very pleasurable, saying this feels good. I want more of this. So that's what I call a dopamine chaser. So next time I will talk about a taboo lover and introduce a shame part and inner critic part and how those four parts interact with each other in a type of transgression or infidelity. I call it novelty seeking type. So stay tuned. We'll spend time to talk about each part, and then we'll come back to talk about their interaction, how it works in infidelity situations. Until next time.